Recently, I've been having these long talks with my mom, in which she tells me details about our family and friends' past I couldn't have understood as a kid. Some stories were wholesome and made us smile, others were dark and filled us both with sadness, and some of them had the bittersweet taste of nostalgia. The last thing was the case when we mentioned the old house, an ancient, large, two-storied building that had been home as a kid. But despite roaming its tall corridors for nearly 6 years, I've never experienced its most prominent feature, according to the locals. It was a haunted place. There are chilling tales taking place inside its walls, dating back from well before my family moved in to rent the first floor. Even now, when the place has changed owners and become a well known restaurant, its paranormal nature seems to prevail. The staff evacuates all customers and closes shop at exactly 10 p.m., even on weekends, and many still regard the house with fear. Of course, I was appalled at this. I asked Mom if she or my brothers had ever seen anything out of the ordinary while we lived there, and she said no. Although she did tell me of a few times our relatives and friends had paranormal experiences at the old house. She even admitted to have done a ritual of sorts so as to appease the ghosts, right before our family spent their first night at the building. But now, driven by nostalgia and curiosity, my mom and I have just delved a bit more into the house's paranormal history. This is what we found out. Right before we moved to the old house, my mom was approached by some people who warned her of the building's fame. It was thanks to them that she performed the ritual I described, and it might be thanks to them that our family was spared of a cruel fate. Whatever the case, we're especially grateful to a woman who had been the house's caretaker for 8 years. A kind hearted, short, and sturdy mother of two that lived across the street. She was a common sight during my childhood, as she cleaned the top floor and roof of the house every Monday or so. Her son, a few years older than I am, had looked after me whenever my mom went to deliver homemade cakes, and her daughter had occasionally been my playmate. Looking back, those two had been closer to me than my own brother and sister, both of them way older than me, both away doing their thing most of the time. 6 years were spent in the old house, but its caretaker remained for another six, adding up to a total of about 20 years of constantly being in close contact with the building. Given her experience, and that Mom and her have never lost touch, this hardy woman was an obvious choice for getting to know more about the house. We agreed on a time and place. 4 p.m., Tuesday, at her unchanged address, right in front of the old house. The old house is located on a corner, and it occupies a decent chunk of the two streets. We came in through the side that still had that metal two-pieced garage door. Not much activity was to be seen at the now restaurant bar, so while we walked to the caretaker's, exactly the opposite corner of the house, I got a good, long look at the facade. Its lacquered brick walls and its subtle grey stone cornices and window frames are still there, looking rather familiar. The only change was in the windows themselves. They're now openable and have these modern-looking wooden transoms. We arrived at our destination, rang the bell, and shortly after, the caretaker greeted us effusively. In front of her place, there was a dusty stone bench beneath a withered tree. We sat there, the old house looming over us, perhaps knowing of our intentions. The caretaker's tone and visage grew a bit dark as we asked if she would please tell us the stories she knew. Not without hesitation, she agreed and soon began talking with generosity and confidence. The caretaker had been a trusted employee of the family that owned the old house, although she never really got to know them all that well, because they mostly stayed out of the property. The fellow employees of the caretaker had told her that the sons and daughters of Don Eulelio, the last patriarch of the family, loathed the building, and the reason was that they couldn't stand the iron fist of their father, despite the fact that he had died over 10 years ago. Chills down their spines, the feeling of being observed, their hair being pulled, and even shoves and heaves were what they all experienced at the house after the passing of their father. That, and the ever-returning deep aroma of cigars, a favourite of Don. The caretaker herself would attest to that personally. One time, as she was cleaning the fine furniture on the second floor, she caught a strong scent, which she eventually traced back to the late patriarch's studio. It had three large windows in a row, the one in the center crowned with a multicolored fanlight. At around 4 p.m., unless the curtains were drawn, the small but comfy room would be lit with a blinding seven-colored light. As the atelier had ample view to the lobby and the stairs, the caretaker saw the light well before she got close enough to note that there was a cloud of smoke hovering inside the room. Expecting a fire, she ran to the scene, only to be unable to locate the origin of the tobacco-reeking fumes that suddenly invaded the entire studio. She tried to leave no stone unturned, but fear and cough got to her and she quickly left. Daring a final glance at the room, she saw that the intense rainbow light refracted through the smoke, giving it a ghostly and terrible appearance. The caretaker, after doing the whole first floor, was able to see that the fumes had vanished. She went up to have a closer look, saw no smoke, and noticed that the cigar was now but a faint note in the air. Only after the family decided to move the ashes of Don Eulelio someplace else did the cigar odor stop altogether. Furthermore, the caretaker recalled being a lot less uneasy at the building without that old wooden chest containing the remains. All of them black and white, from a distant past. The patriarch's portraits had also been removed. His stern eyes and wrinkled mouth would no longer harass the denizens of the house. Was he really so terrible, I asked, thinking that perhaps we might be doing an injustice to the dead. Both Mom and the caretaker gave me a look, as if I was supposed to know what the deal was. Then they started telling me of Don's bad deeds, and those of his whole family too. Apparently, at some point, they generally feared for their bad blood, treachery and greed, but this patriarch might have been the worst of all. The caretaker was skeptical about this tale, but she told us that one of the oldest employees the family had to this day had this to say about Don's death. His final night at this world took place at the house during a tumultuous storm. Oddly enough, he was expecting a visitor exactly at midnight, so he warned his staff to be ready at the door. Thunderbolts lit the shadows and shook the walls as three short but strong knocks were heard at the main entrance. A tall figure, hooded in a grey old robe like a priest's, was let in. Silent, they reached Don's chambers and stood at the dying bedside. The narrator claimed he suspected the hooded figure, so he followed them to the master bedroom. He could see his employer and the figure through the half-open door. They sustained a long conversation, most of which didn't reach the worried servant. He noticed the dark presence seldom spoke, and when they did, it was almost as if they were whispering. Don was apparently talking about his own life, mentioning people and situations in feverish succession. A few of the last words he spoke with ease. I think I've had enough. I've plenty of living. I don't need anything else from you. I'm ready to leave, if you would. He kept on and on about some other topic, but then the figure noticed the spy, turning their head swiftly at the door. The narrator felt menaced by the emptiness that met his gaze. He left in silence, hoping that his curiosity wouldn't get him fired. Or worse. Later that night, the strange visitor was gone, and Don died shortly after. Funeral ceremonies started the next morning. The late patriarch was to be placed alongside his ancestors in an inclusive plot at the local cemetery. Only not a single day had passed before the casket was mysteriously dug out and left right next to the tomb. He was buried again, and the same happened. At that point, the people opposed the patriarch's remains to be laid to rest at the cemetery, claiming that what happened was a bad omen. Hence, the cremation of the body, and it being kept at the old house for a time. They said that the very soil rejected Don's body, for he had been dealing with dark forces, or maybe the devil himself, the caretaker concluded. Afterward, she added that she wasn't sure whether to believe the story or not. I certainly didn't give it much credit, and as she confessed later that day, neither did Mom. Nonetheless, we were grateful that she shared it with us and asked if she would please continue. I don't know about any ghosts or the devil, but I can assure you that there's something wrong at that house. And then she began to tell us about her daughter's experience. I've previously said that she had been my occasional playmate, but as it turns out, she already had someone or something else to play with before my family came. For a time, when the caretaker did the weekly cleaning, she brought her daughter with her to keep her company, and when the going got tough, to help out a little. At first, out of concern, she forced her to stay beside her. Despite that, the curiosity of children being what it is, her daughter often escaped to the empty lot behind the house. The girl claimed that there she'd found a playmate, a little girl just like her. The caretaker was scared at first and ordered her daughter not to go to the lot. But she complained, cried out loud and disobeyed, running from her chores to go with a dear friend. Her mother gave up and one day tried allowing her daughter to play. She surreptitiously followed her and watched over from afar. Her daughter was talking all by herself, running after the wind and throwing dirt at the walls. After this, the daughter was quite happy and eager to see her friend again. So it was that the caretaker accepted this weird friendship, not being sure if it was really so. When my family arrived at the old house, the caretaker was a bit relieved to know that her daughter could now play with actual people. I, though, couldn't say whether they truly stopped playing altogether, since I never met this supposed playmate, and the caretaker's daughter never mentioned anything. Whatever the case, things were going smooth until something occurred. Her daughter got really, really sick all of a sudden. My mom recalled that incident quite clearly, although she never got to know the details. The little girl had a strong fever, wouldn't eat anything, and had nightmares, some of them reaching the levels of night terrors. She was seen by a couple of doctors, but to no avail. At that point, the caretaker knew better. Her daughter's illness was related to the paranormal. She had pondered this weird idea for a while, but it was only in her desperation that she acted upon it. One time, while cleaning the second floor, the girl got out of sight for a moment, and then returned at her mother's behest, with some white and black dust on her clothes. She reprehended her daughter, but the caretaker thought nothing else of it. Then it hit her. Those stains could be ashes. Don's ashes was still around at the time, inside the big wooden chest. Only, had she ever really checked to see if it was locked? She let her daughter know that the container had the remains of a dead person, and as such, it was to be respected. Could it be that she opened the chest and touched its contents anyway? Whatever the case had been, the caretaker contacted a witch doctor. Her daughter was treated with rituals that had the intention of cleansing her body from evil spirits, or something along those lines. Eventually, she recovered her health, and the nightmares stopped being so frequent and terrible. When asked about if she had ever disturbed the remains of the patriarch, she said she didn't remember doing so. Nowadays, the daughter's doing great. She's actually married now, to my surprise. The caretaker herself, though, claims to be haunted by nightmares and sleep paralysis. I then wondered why she hadn't moved somewhere else. I didn't ask her, but perhaps the woman believes that whatever haunts her is now with her, so to speak. Or maybe she's waiting for a good chance to sell her place, as the area that surrounds the house is booming, with new businesses and buildings appearing right and left. We said goodbye to the caretaker, who never really stopped taking care of the old house. Maybe one day she can find the peace and quiet she deserves. After that, we headed to the house itself, which was roughly reformed and restored. It truly was a different vibe to it, at least different enough to make people forget about its supposed haunting, and flock to it to try its various dishes. We ordered, and used the occasion to question the waiter. He spoke openly. As I had heard, the building's power is still present. The official caretaker, so to speak, has had scary stuff happen to him during the night shift. He claimed to have seen tall and murky figures in the stairs, and he also constantly hears whispers and moans of pain that chill the spine. Nonetheless, he wasn't around, so we couldn't get the information straight from the horse's mouth. Mum and I paid the check and went home. This is some of what we gathered about the paranormal stories of the old house. It's not much, and a good chunk of it is dubious, so take it as you will. But the persistence with which these stories come up, and the trust I have in the narrators that I've referenced here, are enough to convince me There's something special about the old house. The last time I was actually back there was probably 15 years ago, and it's still there. And looking at Google Maps, it looks pretty much the same. I grew up in Fayetteville and moved away in 1999. Right by Max Abbott Middle School, there were apartments called Winding Creek Apartments. If you follow Winding Creek Road down until it dead ends, there was a trail that takes you into some woods. Looking on Google Maps, you can see it's not that big, and the trail cuts through to the neighborhood to the west. I remember it taking about 15 to 20 minutes walking to get from one side to the other between neighborhoods. There's a small creek that winds around back there and goes around the apartments. Near the pool, though, the creek circles around on itself like the eye of a needle, creating a small island. During the construction of the apartments, the construction people decided that this area would be great for discarding large concrete slabs. These large discarded slabs around on the small island led to the name that's become known by Graveyard Island. Now, aside from countless hours of teenage drinking and pot smoking that has most likely happened well before and well after me and my friends frequented there, nothing remarkably haunting has ever personally happened to me or my friends there. However, there is a creepy, uneasy feeling that permeates that area, like you're being watched. But if you take that trail, that creepy feeling gets much, much worse. My friends and I knew those woods very well, as I grew up in the apartments from 13 to 17 years old. We used to cut through that trail a lot to get to one of our friends' houses in the other neighborhood. We never went that deep into the woods at night, especially not by ourselves. My friends all had their own creepy stories of their own, hearing and seeing things, but this was mine. One fall afternoon, the trees were probably 3/4 barren of leaves. It was getting dark, but still a good amount of light that I felt fine going home by myself through the trail. As I was about 5 minutes into the woods, that feeling of being watched became very palpable. I was very used to the noises of the woods, but distinctly heard what sounded like footsteps through the brush of the thick woods, probably about 30 yards or so. The area was very viney and overgrown, nearly impossible to walk through without a machete or something. I obviously started to pick up the pace and began walking fast, going over the rocky, rooty terrain. About 2 or 3 minutes later, I heard footsteps again. I stopped and looked around to try to see if it was a deer or something. And at that moment, I saw a silhouette of a person peeking around the side of a tree. I say silhouette because it looked like a predator when it was invisible, but dark and shadowy around its center. I never saw anything else like it, or anything like it on TV. After my brain clicked back on, needless to say, I made a full-on dash towards my neighborhood. I looked back to the side and back of where I first saw it, but closer towards me, but still about 20 to 30 yards away, keeping parallel with the trail. I saw it running. Its whole body seemed to be sort of striding through the thick brush, like how someone runs in knee-high water at the beach. Fast, but still slowly. And I heard it too. I heard the strides of its feet hit the ground, but no leaves or bush moved as it kicked up. It was the first and only time I truly felt haunted in my life. Yelling obscenities under my breath, I booked it the rest of the way, not stopping or spending more than a glance over my shoulder to see where it was. I didn't stop until I got to the street in my neighborhood. I turned around to catch my breath on the road about 40 yards away from the trailhead, and the only way I can describe it was that the entire tree line was darker than it should have been. I didn't see anything, but I got the feeling that all of the trees were eerily laughing at me. It took me a while, but I eventually started going back to the woods, but always with at least another person, and never at night. My story was added to the many others my friends had of the area. This happened to me a couple of years ago. Just to add some background to the story, I have had strange encounters before, so I try to reason them out because I have to live alone most of the time at my house. So, yes, I hardly claim something as paranormal. Now this is out of the way, let's start with the story. I was back from my college, and my family started renovations at our place. As I was not permanently back home, and my parents were over 60, I was supposed to take care of the renovations. Because we live in a small apartment, we decided to rent out my aunt's place, which was in the next building, to store furniture and save my parents from unwanted fumes and dust. Also, for the build-up. She isn't my real aunt, but a really close neighbour who used to take care of me when I was a kid, as both of my parents were working. So you can imagine, I've spent years in their house. As construction, fairly large project started, we all started living at my aunt's place. As we live in an apartment complex, so the two buildings faced each other. It was easier for me to get up and go directly to the construction site and supervise. During the second week, I got a back injury due to carrying heavy objects and constantly sitting down and getting up from the floor. To avoid any fuss, we avoided shifting beds to my aunt's place, and hence all of us were sleeping on the floor. The doctor suggested that I sleep on a higher surface. Since then, something weird has started happening. I was scared of the dark in my aunt's place. Now you need to remember, this is my childhood home, and I've lived alone most of my life. And also, I can't sleep unless it's completely dark. The sleeping setup was such that I had my bed vertically set, facing a small window, and to my right there was a wall and left facing the room door, and out into the gallery, and in the same room my mum and dad slept perpendicular to me. I was so scared of the dark in this house that every time my parents got up to use the washroom, in the middle of the night, I stood up screaming, "Who's there?" and they had to calm me down before using the washroom. This went on for over 2 months, and I hardly got to sleep for those 2 months. This was unnatural behaviour for me, which scared my parents, but they couldn't do anything. I tried calming my fear by staying in the gallery before bedtime, trying to rationalise my mind. But at night, my body reflexes refused to calm down. I would involuntarily start screaming, "Who's there?" or just out loud scream. One day, my parents went out in the evening to a social gathering, just a kilometre away from the house. And as soon as the labour left for the day, I came back to my aunt's place and started chatting with my friends and watching YouTube videos while sitting on my makeshift bed. I suddenly started feeling as if I have heaviness on my chest, and it accelerated quickly. I started gasping for air, and all I could do was send a crackling voice note to my friend, "Send help." This was the time when I felt compression on my chest and words couldn't come out of my mouth. It felt like an hour or two had passed while I was still restricted from breathing properly. I luckily still had the phone in my hand and managed to dial my father's emergency contact. But I couldn't say anything except "come help." Luckily, my father responded to my SOS and came running home. He had the keys as he locked the house before leaving. And when he saw me, he almost fainted. From his account of the story, I had no colour in my face and was trying to breathe, but all my efforts seemed to be worthless. He clearly said he believed that I was on my deathbed. He dialed for an ambulance. When my mother and her friend rushed in, they immediately came to me and my aid. As they stated, my hands and feet were extremely cold, even if it was almost 40 degrees Celsius outside. They started rubbing my hands and feet, waiting for the ambulance. But suddenly, after 7 to 8 minutes of them rubbing my hands and feet, I got up with no sign of inconvenience. It felt like a miracle to everyone. I was completely fine. Afterwards, I sent back the ambulance and confirmed I was fine. My parents decided to get all my tests done. That night, I slept with my mother on the floor, and hence my feet faced towards the door. As usual, I couldn't fall asleep and just faced away from my mother, and was staring out the window, which was diagonally right to me. My aunt's house was on the ground floor, and it was common to hear sounds from outside if people walked by, and the stained glass made it possible to look outside with clarity when the streetlights were on, and the lights inside the room were off. Although in this same situation, no one would be able to look inside unless they pressed their face on the glass window. I was looking out when I thought I heard a boy. It was strange to listen to a boy so late at night, but as we live in a gated community, I figured, either the parents have taken the kid for a walk or they're returning from an event. All in all, it wasn't uncommon in the complex for kids to run without parental supervision, as the guards only allowed residents or confirmed guests to enter the complex. While I was thinking about this, the boy edged close to the window and started looking inside with his hands covering the side of his face. I got scared, given that there was no sound of a parent and I couldn't figure out the features, in spite of the excess light coming from the street lamp. I got scared and turned away. I had goosebumps and I was trying to calm myself down, thinking, it's just a kid, and my imagination is running wild. I squinted my eyes as my anxiety and fear only grew and tried to sleep, when I felt footsteps on the floor. I could feel the tremble of the ground and hear loud and clear footsteps near my ear. My senses were hyperactive as my eyes were tightly shut and I refused to move. I knew it wasn't my mother or father, as I could feel my mother's arm right next to me, and my father was in the other room. And for him to walk so close to my ear, we had to enter through the gate and cross over our bed. And no, we don't hear footsteps like this when someone is outside the house. I had slept 2 weeks on the floor before my injury. Well, as all this was happening, I felt the foot to sleep right next to me. But then, suddenly calmness filled the room. I was no longer afraid. I opened my eyes and looked around and found no one. No boy, no fear of the hallway. It was as everything was back to normal. Although I didn't sleep the rest of the night, I was joyful. We were shifting back to our apartment as the construction had finished, and just a few minor details were left. I went for my tests as scheduled, and it turned out I was completely fine, although the doctor said I showed signs of a stroke during my episode. And no, I never had anxiety issues. The next day was a weekend, and my sister came to visit. We hadn't told her about my fear or about any incident that had happened. She was sleeping with me that night in my room at our original house. We were shopping online when I turned and went to sleep. Yes, finally I did manage to sleep. But my sister was still scrolling on her phone, looking through discounts and shopping. As per her account, she felt as if she couldn't move her hands and legs, but only her eyes. And she started feeling scared as she felt as if I was going to turn and face her and choke her to death. It was almost sleep paralysis for her, but she wasn't asleep and fully aware of her surroundings. She started chanting prayers, and what felt like hours had passed. She suddenly could move again, and she flunked out of the room straight to my parents' room and slept with them. Next morning, when she confessed the events of the night before, we told her the episodes with me. We carried on our day as usual, dismissing a connection. That day, we had Labour help pick our stuff back to our place from my aunt's house. I got a call from my professor back home from the university. He greeted me as usual, and suddenly while talking to him, he asked me, "Do you have blue flowers around you?" This was completely random and out of character for him. I was shocked, but still answered, "No. Do blue flowers even exist?" He paused, and I gasped. Right in front of me, 2 men were carrying out a makeshift bed, and underneath was an old rug with, you guessed it, blue flowers drawn on it. We hadn't seen them before, as the makeshift bed was permanently spread out for the last 2.5 months. Also, to be noted, I never clicked a picture of this place, and my professor didn't know that I'm living at my aunt's apartment. He continued explaining in detail all the colours around the room. The red fridge, the blue inverter, the wooden door, the balcony with the white cat, and then stopped at the window. He stayed strange. Did something happen at that window? I was at a loss for words. My professor, who was living in another state, to whom I never mentioned any incident that happened with me, was telling me something happened around the window, where I saw a young boy last night. Well, as strange as it sounds, on my questioning, my professor said, "I just felt like it," and never talked on the subject again. I explained my conversation with my professor to my family, and they had no clue what exactly was happening. But then my mother confessed. She thought she saw a glimpse of my dead brother in the house one day, and chopped it off to her remembering him as it was his birthday month. I had an elder brother who died young and before I was born. It's been almost 32 years since his death now, and I've never seen him, except a photo of him when he was 5. While driving my rig through the desert late at night, trying to get back to the yard, that's what we call the place where all the tractor trailers are kept, the yard, I saw something that terrified me deep into the belly of my soul. I always thought it was a myth, a legend, something that truckers told themselves to keep themselves awake, but I was so wrong. You see, I am, well, was, a cross-country truck driver for the Remington Trucking Company, based out of a very popular city in California. I'm not married. I don't have any kids. I mean, I had everything I needed in my sleeper cab. A bed, a microwave, a mini fridge, a portable DVD player, and a coffee pot. I could wash clothes, get a shower, and get some real food at a truck shop. And there were always lot lizards hanging around for any other needs, so to speak. Besides, cross-country truck drivers make a lot of money. Anyway, you don't care about that. You see, I grew up in Camp Springs, Maryland, and every time my parents and I would go visit my aunt and uncle and their family in New Jersey, my father would always take exit 7A on the Jersey Turnpike. You know, the truck route. He would ride that thing all the way down to exit 15 where it ends and merges back into the turnpike itself. He claimed it was faster. That's how I became infatuated with 18-wheelers. It scared the crap out of my mom sometimes, but she'd just close her eyes and try to sleep through it. I, on the other hand, loved it. When I graduated high school, I knew I wanted to be a truck driver. So I saved some money from a cashier job at Billy's Burger Barn and enrolled at a local truck driving school. I completed the 6-week course and got my CDL. The school helped me to find a job at the Remington Trucking Company. It was all the way across the country, but it was a job, and I've been here ever since. I packed my stuff, said bye to my parents, got in my car, and headed for sunny California. I worked here for a couple of years, drove their trucks, slept in the cab when I was on the road, slept in the shop when I wasn't, saved some money, and eventually bought my own rig, a used neon green Kenworth W900. I loved that rig. Now what I'm about to tell you is something that I never told anyone before. Well, except my therapist. I was heading home after delivering a load of tables, chairs, and sitting booths to a bar in Florida. Some guy named John was remodeling the place. I got on Route 66 in Albuquerque and began my final stretch home. It was about 2:30 in the morning. It was a beautiful night that night. The full moon shining down on the road, not another vehicle in sight, just me and the white lines. I rolled the windows down, letting in the cool night desert air. I turned on the radio and turned it to Coyote 102.5 classic rock. They were actually playing some decent songs that night. I drove down the road, rocking out, enjoying the trip, for about an hour and a half. The radio station then began to fade, so I just turned it off. I kept the windows down and just rolled on. With the only sound was the engine humming and the wheels winding down the road, and nothing to look at but the white lines. Now, I'm not sure if you know about what's called white line fever. If you do, then great. If you don't, then let me explain. It's basically highway hypnosis. It can happen to anyone, especially when you're driving at night. That's when the lines on the road going by so quickly in a flashing pattern hypnotize you, so you have no recollection of driving or anything that happened while you were in that altered state. Anyway, I caught a fever. The last thing I remember was turning off the radio, and suddenly I was sitting at a truck shop about 100 miles away from where I last remembered being. I blinked my eyes and shook my head. I need coffee, I told myself. I rolled the windows up, shut off the truck, and went inside. I got the largest cup of coffee they had, added cream and sugar, just how I like it, paid for it, and then went back out to my truck. I got in the truck, took a drink of the coffee, and put the cup in the holder. Put my seatbelt on, company rules and all, started the truck, wiped my eyes, and put the truck in gear and rolled out. I got back on the road and continued driving, drinking as much coffee as I possibly could to try and stay awake. Now, as we all know, coffee is full of caffeine, which helps keep us awake. But did you know that too much caffeine will cause it to counteract itself and have the total opposite effect? Well, after about 10 minutes of pounding back that coffee, my eyes began to feel heavy. Wake up, Mike. Fight through it. You can make it, I told myself. But I was wrong again. As each mile marker passed, my eyes became heavier and heavier. I felt myself start to doze off. I shook my head to snap myself out of it and reached for my coffee cup. In my sleepy state, I reached but couldn't feel the cup. I took my eyes off the road for just a second, seeing the cup and reaching for it. I turned my hazy eyes back to the road, and that's when I saw it. The black dog. As I rolled down Route 66, heading west to California, eyes heavy, barely able to stay awake, my headlights beaming out of the darkness that stood before me. It appeared out of nowhere. Its eyes were blood red, its teeth were sharp and shiny, its coat was as black as the devil's soul, and its face was so hideous that I can't even describe it. That image will forever be burned into my subconscious mind. My headlights shined upon it as it ran full speed down the center of the lane, directly toward the front of my truck. Holy shit, I screamed as I hit the brakes and whipped the cab hard to the right. My front passenger steer tire then went off the side of the road, falling a few inches onto the grass and heading straight for a ditch. My rear drive wheels were next to follow. In my panicked state, I tried correcting the turn by whipping the carb hard to the left. I thought I was successful until momentum and inertia took over, causing the trailer to slam hard into the driver's side rear drive tires, causing the cab to slide diagonally down the road. I then felt the entire truck start to flip over on its side. I said a little prayer, put my hands over my eyes and let whatever was going to happen, happen. I screamed as the truck went over and slammed hard on the ground, flinging me around like a rag doll. Thank God, I was wearing my seatbelt. I don't even want to think about what would have happened if I hadn't been wearing it. The truck then slid for about 30 yards but never went into the ditch. It almost did, but thankfully it didn't. The sound of glass breaking and grinding metal filled the air, as well as thick grey smoke and the smell of oil and other fluids from the truck's engine. Luckily, the gas tank wasn't damaged in the crash. When it was over, I just laid there, suspended almost upside down in the air, still in my seatbelt. Thankful to still be alive, I reached up, grabbed the oh shit bar, and unlicked my seatbelt. My legs hit the gear shift as my body fell. I maneuvered my legs off of it, still holding onto the bar, and stood on top of the broken glass from the passenger side window, letting go of the bar. Now what happened next completely terrified me. I was about to call dispatch when I heard it. Now I've heard other truckers talking about seeing the black dog and the wreck that followed, but I never heard anything like what happened to me. Maybe they left this part out, I don't know, because this was totally fucked up. As I stood there, I began to hear a low growling sound that intensified with every passing second, until it was almost at a deafening tone. I then heard a loud thud, followed by scratching on the driver's side door right above me. I'm glad I rolled the windows up when I left the truck shop, I thought, as that was the only window not cracked or broken. I saw bright red lights shoot across the window. At first I thought they were lights, but they weren't. What the fuck is that? I said, followed by another loud thud on the ground. Now for some reason, I turned and looked out the windshield, which was severely cracked, and saw two bright red eyes staring directly at me through the cracked windshield. This thing was mere inches away from me. Its face then came into focus. Its snout was pulsating as it opened its mouth, revealing row after row of immensely white teeth. No, not teeth, fangs. It was drooling and foaming at the mouth. I screamed and jumped between the driver's seat and the passenger seat into the sleeper, which was totally destroyed, by the way. My shoulder landed hard on the edge of the mini fridge. I thought I broke it. I screamed out in pain. I grabbed my shoulder and sat down on the top of the now broken microwave. I hunched over as far as I could and ducked my head down so I couldn't be seen. The dog then barked the loudest and most demonic, evil bark that I've ever heard. Worse than those evil dogs in that 80s horror movie, Devil Dogs. Now, I'm not a very religious man. I mean, I believe in God, carry a Bible with me on long trips and all that good stuff. But I don't go to church, and I've never even read the Bible. But at that moment in time, I wished I did. I saw the Bible amidst all the rubble. I picked it up, held it close to my chest, and prayed and prayed and prayed for this thing to go away. It did not go away. Periodically, I would stick my head up above the side of the passenger seat and see it standing there, growling and barking, throughout the next 3.5 hours. Now, as I said before, I never told anyone this story besides my therapist. Well, and a guy named Rooster. You see, I'd been having night terrors because of it. I would wake up screaming in the middle of the night about 3 to 4 times a week. It traumatized me so much that I stopped driving at night in fear of seeing that dog. I knew I needed help, so I called a therapist. I told her this story and told her about my night terrors. She diagnosed me with PTSD and prescribed me Zoloft once a day. I take it at night since it makes me drowsy. It helps a little bit. I don't wake up screaming half as much. She also suggested that instead of keeping the whole traumatic experience bottled up inside of me, that I should tell as many people as I possibly could what happened. So that's what I'm doing here. Like I was saying, the dog stood there for 3.5 hours. Suddenly, I heard the sound of something heavy hitting the glass. I stuck my head above the seat one last time to see the dog rush toward the glass, hitting its head hard against it, cracking it a little more. It stepped back, let out an ear-piercing growl, its eyes glowing brighter, as it charged the glass once again, this time breaking through it. Pieces of glass shot everywhere. I screamed as I fell back to my sitting position, held the Bible close, and began reciting the Lord's Prayer. I was completely scared shitless. I then saw its head rise above the passenger seat and stare directly at me, eyes glowing, fangs showing, and mouth foaming. It snarled, drew back, and was just about to pounce on me when it let out this ear-piercing shriek of pain and began shaking violently. Thick, grey smoke then began pouring out of its eye sockets, its ears, and its mouth. I screamed again. As I did, I saw that dog exploded into a cloud of thick grey smoke and disappeared into thin air. I cleared the smoke with my hand, coughed a little, only to realise that the sun was beginning to rise. Sunlight must be killing this thing, I thought. I'd never been so glad to see the sunrise in my life. The dog was gone. What the fuck? I said, completely exhausted. I took a deep breath as my fear began to subside. I sat the Bible in the microwave next to me and pulled out my cell phone. I then called dispatch. I gave them my location, told them I flipped my truck and how long I'd been out here. I didn't tell them what really happened. Dispatch said they would send out a recovery rotator truck and a heavy-duty tow truck. I thanked them and ended the conversation, putting my phone back in my pocket. I then took a deep breath, slowly crept over the passenger seat, reached up and grabbed the CB. I pressed the button and said, "Breaker 19, this is Vanilla Mike. I'm 1034 in need of assistance. Anyone got their ears on out there? Come back." Hoping it still worked. Shortly after I put that out on the radio, I got a response. "Yeah, Vanilla Mike, this is Red Rooster. I hear you're 1034. What's your 20? I then gave him my location. That's what 20 means in trucker lingo. Anyway, about 30 minutes went by when I heard the sound of air brakes. I stood up on the side of the seat and looked out the driver's side window to see a red 18-wheeler stopped on the shoulder of the road right behind my truck. I then climbed out of the window, maneuvered over the hood, slid down to it on the ground below, and walked around the front of my truck and began walking over to the red truck. A long, red-haired older gentleman climbed out of the cab, met me halfway, and shook my hand. We introduced ourselves to each other. He reminded me of Willie Nelson, wearing a cowboy hat and a pair of cowboy boots. Anyway, he looked at my truck and then asked what happened. I told him. He said, "Yep, I saw that black son bitch back in 73. Dead of night. Came out of nowhere. Jackknifed my rig. Almost lost my load and my life. Ugly little sucker. He woke me the hell up though." "You alright?" he asked. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just a little shaken up," I answered. My shoulder was killing me. Anyway, he then invited me to sit in his truck and said he would wait with me until the recovery truck arrived. We talked for about 2 hours about everything under the sun, drinking coffee, telling jokes, and laughing. He had his own coffee maker. The recovery truck and the tow truck finally arrived. It was about 10:30 at this point. It took them 4.5 hours to get my truck upright. The cops had to shut down the westbound lane to do so, and they gave me a ticket for inattentive driving. I just paid it. The judge wouldn't have believed me anyway. Now, once my truck was back upright, and I secured a ride home from the tow truck driver, I said goodbye to Rooster. He climbed in his truck, hit the horn a couple times, and just rolled on. He was a good man. I hope our paths cross again one day, under better circumstances, of course. I then took a look at the carriage. It was massive. I was lucky to be alive. If I would have gone left and fallen on the driver's side, I would have surely died. That's it. I'm done, I told myself. Once was enough for me. I never stepped foot in a rig ever again. The owner of the trucking company was nice enough to have the truck towed back to the shop at his expense. I signed it over to him and he put it, damaged and all, in the side yard of the shop, with a sign across the windshield that reads, "Believe the myth." Now, even though I don't drive or ride in a truck anymore, I still work here. I'm now in charge of dispatch. The old dispatcher took my job. Good luck to him. Anyway, it pays a lot less money, but I'm okay with that. I don't have to worry about seeing that dog anymore. Now, I assign drivers their loads, provide mapping information, and ensure the product is loaded properly, as well as many other things. I rent a room at the flop house down the street. The room is about as big as my sleeper cab was, maybe a little bigger. There's a bed, a dresser, a lamp, and a rolling clothes rack like you see in laundromats in the corner. I had to buy a new mini fridge, a new microwave, and a new coffee pot, as they were all damaged in the crash. I also bought a small flat screen TV and a DVD player. The flop house doesn't have cable. Anyway, there's a shared bathroom with 3 showers side by side at the end of the hall, and a couple coin-operated washers and dryers downstairs. It's really not that bad. I don't mess with lot lizards anymore. No, I got a real girlfriend named Natasha. I met her at Chelsea's restaurant. My shoulder was doing fine. It was just badly bruised. Now, in closing, I'd just like to say that any of you truckers out there, if you feel your eyes getting heavy and it's hard to focus on the road, please promise me that you'll stop. Pull over on the side of the road, stop at a gas station, stop somewhere, because the black dog is no myth. It's no legend. No, that dog is real. I've seen it, and it's got one hell of a bite. I'm not sure if I consider this as a haunting or not, but this did happen. I'm from a small town in India, and by small, I mean we don't have a lot of educational institutions here. So to do coaching for exams, I had to go to the nearest city, which was around an hour's drive on a lonely highway. The timings were 4 to 8 p.m, and it would take me 9:30 to reach home. We used to do carpooling. There were 7 of us friends who used to attend the coaching daily. One day, while returning at night, we were crossing the bridge on the highway, when suddenly a man rushed in front of our car. The shocking part is that there was no way he could have rushed in from the sides, as we were on a bridge. The driver somehow managed to apply the brakes, and mostly all of us heard a thud except one of my friends, who believed he saw the man escape and jump down the other side of the bridge. There was no dent on the car, nor was there anyone near the car. We were stopped right in the middle of the highway with no cars approaching from far away. Our car refused to start when we wanted to leave, and the driver, with our help, pushed the car to the side. He said that there was nothing wrong with the car, and yet it didn't start for the next hour. There was no car approaching with whom we could ask for help, and there were eerie noises coming from the land beneath. None of us was brave enough to check below the bridge, but finally, after an hour, the car did start and we could finally leave that place. It was one of the most uneasy feelings I've ever had. I'm having trouble sleeping a lot. A lot of the time, I've been woken up by unexplained things and it scares me and my family. My family and I have been woken up in the middle of the night to figures watching us. I remember one dream so clearly. I was laying in my bed and I woke up to a black figure standing by the window. The dream felt long and I watched the figure get closer to me until it was right by my face. I could feel the dark figure breathe on me. I woke up in a panic and tried to fall back asleep. I tried to forget about the dream until a couple of days later, I could hear an exhale in my room. Later that night I was asleep. It was about 3:45 a.m. when I woke up to someone tapping my back repeatedly. Then I felt my blanket being tugged. I shrugged it off until I felt something tapping my head. I was panicking, but nothing was there. I've had problems of being woken up in the middle of the night to shadows in my room in middle school. I shared a room with my sister. We both woke up in the middle of the night. However, I saw a tan-coloured figure crouched down beside my bed looking at me. I was scared and hid under my blankets, and when I woke up, it was gone. Hoping my sister was awake, I said out loud to her, "Did you see that?" And she started crying and said yes. Whatever spirit was with me, it scares me, but I don't think it's intending to harm me or my sister. The problems happening in my house don't make sense, because we don't have an old home. It was built about 12 years ago. I can't explain what's happening. My mother and father were woken up a couple of months ago to a grey figure crouched down on top of their dresser. It was watching them for 30 minutes before it disappeared. A couple of nights later, my parents were woken up around 2 a.m. when they saw another figure by their dresser. This time, it was a lot darker and bigger, and they watched it walk across their room slowly and disappear. I don't know why these things are happening, but I don't think they intend to harm us. They're just watching. Which is still very weird, but I don't know how to describe it. We normally hear something or see something happening in our house about once a week or two. I have tried smudging our house with sage, but that hasn't helped. When I lived back in my parents' house, we got this cool looking vintage vanity dresser from a yard sale. At the time, we didn't think much of it, so we placed it in our living room and had it facing the couch for a very long time. At the time, me and my sister were around 16. I had two other siblings that were a couple years older than me. The house we lived in wasn't very old either. It was night time, and I was sitting out in the living room on the couch when I noticed a pale white thing popping up behind the couch when I would look at the mirror on the vanity dresser. It would slowly pop its head up behind me when I wasn't fully looking at the mirror. I started to get really freaked out when I noticed it was a head with deep black eyes. Starting to tear up, I ran to my little sister's room and told her to come to the living room and sit where I was. She sat and started tearing up too when she saw the figure's head pop up behind her through the mirror. Little did we know that this wasn't the first time we would see it. Both myself and my older sister started to have dreams of this creature. But I don't think it was a dream. I think I got sleep paralysis. I was laying in bed when I saw in my bedroom window the same pale, white, dark-eyed creature outside. I blinked, and it came inside my room, slowly getting closer to me, till it was right beside my bed. I knew it was real, because I felt its breath hit my face. The vanity dresser was then moved to my little sister's bedroom. She would always sleep facing the wall, because she could see the creature in the mirror as she slept. It would also pop out from the corners of the mirror when she did her makeup. Our parents didn't believe us that much until our mother saw it for herself, while my youngest sister was with her. They were in the kitchen cooking dinner when my youngest sister saw the creature behind my mother and the shadow of it starting to dart away. When my sister gasped and screamed because she saw the reflection of the creature from the glass on the oven. There have been multiple times in my house when the doors would shut, cabinets would open, pictures would get knocked down. Hear voices, knocks, hear footsteps on the carpet walking up to you. Things would scare the animals. Has anyone seen a creature like this before? Located at the banks of the Hot Lake in Oregon's Union County, the Hot Lake Hotel unsurprisingly obtained its fiery name from the close by thermal spring lakes. Resting at the foot of a massive bluff, the hot springs that make up the Hot Lake were once famous among the local people, who believed that the thermal waters had recuperation abilities. The lake itself was firstly named Ikeshpar by the Nez Perce humans, and the region was called the Valley of Peace, as it was declared as a neutral ground and conflict among tribes turned strictly prohibited. In 1864, a Californian called Samuel Fitzgerald Newhart arrived inside the Grand Ronde Valley and constructed a wooden construction near the lakeside, which bizarrely faced the bluff in preference to the lake. Possibly, he wasn't the biggest fan of the steam and the permeating odour of sulphur drifting from the springs. Despite its age, this structure turned into much like a current-day shopping mall, as it contained a ramification of companies, consisting of a post office, a saloon, a dance corridor, a bathhouse, and even a blacksmith. Although modern, this frontier branch store was without a doubt unknown till 1884, when a stretch of the Union Pacific Railroad was built near Hot Lake. It was the improvement of the railroad that put Hot Lake on the map, and in 1903, the old wooden structure was demolished in order to begin the construction of a luxury hotel. In 1904, a man named Dr. W.T. Fye was involved with the task and masterminded the addition of a brick structure that he meant to use as a hospital. Famed architect John V. Bennis, regarded today for his work on the Oregon State University campus, was brought in to lay out the structure and endowed it with its colonial-inspired appearance. By 1908, the principal brick wing of the hotel was finished and covered a humongous region of 65,000 square feet. This wing even contained its own Georgian-style U-shaped solarium, which confronted the bluff and was supposed for the hotel's clinical vacationers. What made the hotel particularly first in the business for its time was its utilization of the close-by geothermal waters to warm its buildings, which made it the first industrial property on the globe to incorporate geothermal heating. When the hotel ultimately reopened, it consisted of 105 visitor rooms, a 60-bed surgical ward, a ballroom, a saloon, a confectionery, a drug shop, a newsstand, reception rooms, laboratories, and a commissary. The health centre construction also had specialised soaking tubs that were facilitated by the lake water, an operating room with an elevated observation deck, and a 1,500 visitor dance hall. Also, the property produced its very own vegetables, dairy goods, meats, and eggs, making it nearly absolutely self-sufficient. It consequently ended up being known as the town under one roof. Dr. Fye formally bought the hotel in 1917 and renamed it Hot Lake Sanatorium. From then on, it was not just a hotel for the rich, but additionally, a hospital in which groundbreaking experimental scientific practices have been carried out using geothermal waters from the springs. Dr. Fye even added a modern-day X-ray facility to the sanatorium, so that sufferers could also accept radiation treatments. Dr. Fye and his team have been celebrated for their fulfillment in treating health issues, inclusive of arthritis, tuberculosis, alcoholism, and venereal disorder, which attracted the attention of the Mayo brothers and subsequently earned the medical institution the nickname the Mayo Clinic of the West. Behind the scenes, however, it was believed that Dr. Fye was an ungodly and arrogant man who regularly attempted to seduce his women patients and refused to socialize with his personnel. It appears the healing powers of the thermal waters weren't enough to keep him alive, as he suffered a premature demise in 1931 because of pneumonia. From then on, the hotel became marked by tragedy, as its western wing was engulfed with flames on the 7th of May 1934. The wood structures were utterly decimated, leaving only the 65,000 square foot brick portion of the resort. Having been crippled, the hotel never recovered completely, and it was only the medical institution located on the third floor that was able to retain functionality. All through World War II, the construction was used as a nurses' schooling centre and a flight faculty. In an even darker flip, the hotel's foyer was reportedly also used to house corpses of the infected during a typhoid epidemic, as the ground was too hard during the winter to dig their graves. The construction was bought by A.J. Roth in 1951, who transformed it into a nursing house and later into an asylum. It functioned in this capacity until 1974, while trade of possession caused it to be repurposed as a restaurant and nightclub. This vibrant transformation turned into a quick-lived one, because it operated with little fulfillment for 2 years, until the ultimate fall. Living on the second floor of the property, proprietor Donna Patty, her husband, and the caretaker Richard Owens were among the first human beings to talk openly about the ghostly population that they witnessed wandering the grounds of the vintage structure. Undeterred by the hotel's ghostly popularity, Dr. Lyle Griffith bought it in the course of the mid-80s and used one nook of the property as a bathhouse. But by 1991, the hotel had closed down completely and remained abandoned for an astonishing 15 years. Defaced by vandals and ravaged by the elements, the hotel changed into nothing but a shadow of its former self. Folks who had been sufficiently courageous to set foot at the property pronounced seeing an apparition of a man lingering within the shadows, normally carrying a spade. He's stated to be the spirit of an old gardener who committed suicide either by putting himself inside the grand ballroom or jumping from the higher tiers of the construction. Others record seeing a small boy walking throughout the hotel's top floor, laughing and frolicking through the corridors. Witnesses say that he almost always appears from the left side. However, the complete right side of his frame appears to be critically burned, leading many to consider he might have met his demise within the earth of 1934. Wait far too long at the staircase of the second floor, and you may spot the phantom of an aged female, who's often seen muttering to herself as she slowly climbs the stairs. Rocking chairs supposedly circulate on their personal accord in the building, and an antique piano, which used to be owned by the spouse of Robert E. Lee, can on occasion be heard playing by itself on the third floor. All of these incidents are considerably light in comparison to the ghosts of the asylum patients, who've been visibly staring out the higher stage windows and whispering unintelligibly. As if that wasn't terrifying enough, it's said that on uncommon occasions, you could listen to disembodied screaming and weeping resonating from the former operating theatre. In reality, the inn's sinister popularity is so pervasive that there's even an internet site entitled Haunted Hot Lake, which is dedicated to records of ghostly encounters inside Hotel Hot Lake. In line with one such eerie story, a group of high school girls were touring the ruins of the resort as a part of a history venture once they had been triumphed over by the temptation to play around. As they explored the third ground, one of the girls went down the hall methodically, kicking each one of the doorways open. As they reached the door closest to the top of the stairs, the girl kicked the door open joyously, only to have it shut in her face. Greatly surprised by what had just befallen, the girl stood frozen in the hallway and gazed in both directions to discover that every one of the doorways was slamming closed one by one, leading right in the direction of where they'd been standing. Fleeing from the scene, they didn't stop till they reached the car park and stood gazing at the building in horror. Deciding it was only a figment of their creativity, they determined to move back to the hotel. But even before they could enter the front door, they heard what gave the impression of 1,000 windows bursting open at the same time. It appeared that the Hotel Hot Lake was destined to fade into obscurity, till its miraculous purchase in 2003 by David Manuel. With the help of his wife Lee, David started the project of restoring the decimated building, which involved replacing over 360 windows and rebuilding the roof. After many years, the resort opened for public tours in 2005. A setback came in 2008 when the previous west wing of the construction collapsed. But as of 2010, it has functioned as a successful bed and breakfast, consisting of 22 resorted guest rooms, a spa, an artwork gallery, a restaurant, and a small museum. In the course of her stay at the bed and breakfast in 2019, Megan Wells recounted how she became led right into a small, darkened theatre, wherein a DVD of the hotel's records and its owners played on a loop. She noted how there was no mention of the hotel's haunted recognition, and the brand new proprietors were enormously reluctant to speak about its darkish past. In her room, she discovered a small diary for guests to record their experiences during their stay at the hotel, in which she found an entry from one named Susan Brooks, who claimed she spoke to the spirits there. The third floor of the construction nevertheless carries numerous pieces of antique hospital equipment, and tarnished signs on the wall request the visitors to keep your voices low and be sweet, a remnant of its history as an insane asylum.